Today we'll be hearing from Kathryn Good. She is the Program Management Officer at the UN, and her job is to coordinate with civil society organizations to organize meetings and push forward the agenda of the UN and make the agenda of the UN in terms of civil society. She graduated from the University of Richmond, and she got her master's degree in German at the University of North Carolina. And much like me and many of the other UNC students, she really loves UNC basketball. She was here when we won the championship. Previously, she was also the director of study abroad at Brown University. When I asked her, something that I found really interesting in our discussion before the talk was, I asked her what her favorite part about working for the UN was, and she said that she really loved to have the opportunity to continue learning about diversity and inclusion as she continues on in her career. So without further ado, she will be talking to us. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathryn. I'm gonna try to be as informal as possible, but I have a PowerPoint to help keep me on track. I'm really thrilled to be here. I haven't been back on campus in many, many years, so this building did not exist when I was here. I lived in a little teeny tiny house on West Patterson Place and would walk to Dye Hall, and that was the excitement of a graduate student then. So Carolina basketball was the one pleasure that existed. I hope that Chapel Hill is a little bit more exciting now. It's certainly a lot more developed, and I'm happy to be here. And I'm gonna talk to you about what I do presently, but if you have questions about jobs or other UN-related things, I will try my best to answer them. Sarah said some of you are security studies people. I'm not. Right? So I work in the Department of Global Communications, and our job is to push out the message and the agenda of the United Nations. So I do work a lot with people in other substantive offices, but it's not my main focus. So I came to the UN from Brown, but I honestly ended up in both of those places because of what I learned at Carolina, and that was how to teach language. And so my first job at the United Nations was as the English language program coordinator. And one of the ways that you come into the UN is through something called the Young Professionals Program. It's a competitive exam process, and it is specific to the area of work that you're interested in doing. And so I went through the competitive exam process to become basically the head of the English language department. The UN has 6 official languages, and we offer free classes in all 6 of those languages to the delegates from the permanent missions and to the UN staff across the system. So go Heels, like it actually got me my job at the UN, because it was sort of like writing my master's exams all over again to write that Young Professionals program, and then do an on-site thing and an interview, and we can talk more about those things after. But presently, in the Department of Global Communications, I manage civil society participation in the high-level events. Is Liza here? Yay! Okay, Lisa. Okay, thank you. I only saw it written ever. So I'm glad to finally meet you. We have amazing high-level events where people make commitments, countries make commitments. We're gonna reduce our carbon footprint. You were here for the Climate Summit, which was sort of the premiere of the GA during this year's high-level week. And the reason that the UN is interested in partnering with civil society organizations is because that's really where the work gets done, right? So the UN is this amazing place, 193 member states come together, all the heads of state and government come to New York for a week. They all have a chance to make statements in the same room for the same amount of time, even though some of them talk longer. But in theory, it's an equal place, and every member state has 1 vote in the General Assembly, and every head of government that is a member state gets to come and make a statement. And then they go home. And then the Secretariat does the work of trying to implement all of the resolutions that they've passed. And we can't do that alone. Obviously, not even if we have headquarters in New York and Geneva and Bangkok and Nairobi, Vienna, right? All of those places are still not enough to get the work done. And so increasingly, the UN has been interested in partnership with civil society and with corporate private sector and academic institutions. That's where people are on the ground, they understand the real problems, they understand best the real solutions. And so more and more, we are including those populations in the meetings themselves. Right? So my job is to identify relevant stakeholders, take them through the vetting process so that they can be approved by the member states to participate, and then advocate for the interventions that they can make so that their ideas and solutions are part of the resolutions that get adopted and then become implemented again at the policy level. I don't know how to work my thing. So the way that happens is through three main channels. There is the department that I work in, which is global communications, and we have a civil society unit. We organize a lot of different activities to educate and inform people, and people can associate an NGO, a university, a program within a university. She's not even listening to me. Can associate and become a civil society organization associated with the Department of Global Communications. And that has certain benefits and gives you access to different meetings. NGLS, which is my section specifically, is support for the high level events. And I convene meetings of the civil society focal points of all of the agencies and departments. So there's somebody that cares about civil society for the Department of Peace Building. There's somebody that cares about it in the Office of the High Commissioner for Refugees, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, UN Women, and we all meet quarterly to talk about what's coming up on the agenda and to share that information so that we can cross-promote and try to bring more people in. DESA, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, has something called the NGO branch. And NGOs can apply to be accredited to ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Affairs Commission, and that gives them the ability to attend the formal meetings. Right now, there are about 5,000 NGOs that have gone through that process and are especially accredited to ECOSOC, and that gives them a large voice in all of the meetings. Some of the meetings are closed and open only to ECOSOC accredited NGOs, and that's the Commission on the Status of Women. This year's Beijing Post 25, we're expecting more than 10,000 civil society representatives. They all will come through ECOSOC accredited NGOs in order to participate and to share their knowledge and advocate for gender equity, which we love. So my job, oh, my friends are here. Hello. They turned off their camera. These are my colleagues. You're gonna see a video of them soon. But they have muted themselves. So you're connecting live, not just with Berlin, but with New York as well. Whoops. I have to go back. So the service where I am and where they are, even though they're hiding, is specific to the high level events. So the Secretary General decided that there should be a summit to talk about climate action. Now he needed to invite a bunch of people to come. Right? So it was our job to put the announcement out, to manage the registration, and then to support the different events. So there were 9 coalitions, youth was one of them, a full day summit for that. Civil society was able to participate in all of the planning meetings on the 2 days prior to the summit. And then a handful were selected to actually be in the room when the member states were and the companies were making commitments on the day of the actual summit. The fun part is that we have a huge youth focus at the UN right now. So according to the United Nations system, anyone under 32 is considered a youth, which is really liberating. But, and under 18 is considered a child. So UNICEF is really the department, the office that works with people under 18. But in that 18 to 32 age range, there is an increasing amount of focus. Right? You have grown up in a world that is different, technologically, connectedly, solutions focused, and there are a lot of people at the United Nations that don't operate that way. And so we understand that we need to think differently, that the problems that we face today aren't going to be solved by the old solutions. They weren't for 74 years. That's why we still have some. But the Secretary General has appointed the special envoy on youth. And so that is Diathma, and she is from Sri Lanka. She's presently the Secretary General's special envoy on youth, and she convenes meetings regularly within New York and around the world to try and engage people under the age of 32 in designing solutions. Is it an app that we need that will enable people to communicate? Is it an on-the-ground solution that is actually going to speak to people in the local area? And then there are fun activities too. So this is our run for climate justice that was, it's the weekend of the New York City Marathon. So increasingly, we're seeing civil society participating. We are trying to figure out ways to monitor and evaluate the impact. So I would say, you know, as you go forward, the more that you can think about measurement and evaluation of different processes. I heard there's a stats class happening over 2 semesters, right? It matters now because people need to know, how do you measure whether or not you've been successful? How do you measure whether or not you've been successful for gender equity in Afghanistan, right? You need to know what it is that you could look at and target your data collection so that you can say, yes, this is working, or no, it's not. So we should abandon it and move on to other kinds of solutions. So I jumped ahead, the youth involvement. I don't know if anybody knows these 2 guys. They're on a Disney show. So they actually fall right on that border of children to youth, but they're influencers. So increasingly, you'll see the UN pushing out a lot of social media. In the time that I've been there, which is 10 years now, we went from having 0 footprint to more than 3 million followers on different social media platforms. So we're still trying to understand Instagram and use it effectively. So there is a bit of a learning curve, and that's part of the reason why I think increasingly we're looking to younger audiences to help us. Once upon a time, a long time ago, I read an article about Thailand, that if it hadn't been for cell phone technology, Thailand would have stayed in a developing economic context forever, right? Because there was no way to communicate. You were never going to build landlines in Thailand. And then it became unnecessary, and people could communicate through cell phone technology overnight. And that's true in most of the developing world or economies in transition. Right? More than half of the world's population has access to 3G now, which if it didn't exist. Sorry, I'm a roamer. I want to go be close to you. But then I abandon you, sorry. Okay. So yeah, so just the way that the world changes, the solutions change and the opportunities open up in places that they didn't before. And so we're trying to get that message out in lots of different ways. And that's why we're using different kinds of influencers. The department that I work in organizes briefings for civil society, and they are webcast live. Usually they're on Thursdays. This week on Monday from 3:15 to 4:15. We'll be broadcasting a session with our Undersecretary General and the President of the General Assembly, talking about his agenda. He started in September. He has until next September to accomplish his agenda, and then a new president of the General Assembly will take over and set the agenda for what is UN 75. Next year, the United Nations will be 75 years old. And we need to know how we can be more responsive and more successful for the planet. So if you're free, 3:15 to 4:15, I encourage you to go and watch the webcast. You can tweet your questions to us and we'll take them from the floor. And if you can't, it lives there forever. So all of the UN's meetings that are public are webcast, and you can just go to webtv.un.org, search that, and then there's a search function if you're interested in somebody's statement, if you're interested in a particular set of meetings on a particular resolution. It's all there, which I think a lot of people think it's all behind closed doors, but most of it is not. There's a conference pretty much every year. We bring together about 4,000 to 5,000 civil society representatives. And the heart of that conference is the NGOs themselves sharing their work in a workshop setting. So like an academic conference, you make a proposal, you submit an exhibit, you submit a workshop, you network with other folks, and then some UN staff, senior staff, and representatives from the permanent missions join different panels. So it's 3 days, and for me, it's really exciting because it's the space where civil society gets to come into the UN headquarters and have their meetings instead of just joining regular UN meetings. So association, which I'm selling over here, is for an NGO. Bridget was talking about an organization. So it doesn't have to be specifically an NGO. It could be an academic institution, a not-for-profit. And then there's also, through the Global Compact, private sector association. For civil society, though, if you're based in New York, or even if you have people who are there sometimes in New York, you are entitled, if you go through the process, to 6 grounds passes. And then you can come and go. You still have to go through security, same as everybody, but you have access to the compound. And then you can schedule meetings, lobby with member states, network with other civil society organizations to share your work and to try to encourage people to take action, especially if you're working towards the Sustainable Development Goals, which is everything on the planet and the people and peace. So it pretty much encompasses all of our organizations. You get priority for the conference, and you get access to all the events that are open. So I encourage it. Special accreditation, and I don't know if this is going to work. This is the process that our office manages. And if you aren't already ECOSOC accredited, which with the exception of those 5,000 organizations is everybody else in the world, but you want to come, for example, to Lisbon for the 2020 Oceans Conference, which will happen in the first week of June, then you need to get special accreditation. So these are the platforms where we are, and I'm happy to have any comments, suggestions, thoughts on our Memoji movie, and to answer any questions that you guys have.